Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Revivalcast. This is episode 11. We've got a bit of a special episode for you guys here today because we have a 2-hour spot, so there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So much, I still think even 2 hours won't be enough between the visit I did over at Ep11 Studios this past week on Tuesday, and then we also had a bunch of stuff. There was quite a bit of forum talk. There was a huge post about standing points and stuff about caves. There was a lot of really impactful discussions going on. So that'll all be stuff we're going to try and cover in this episode. But we probably won't get to all of it, but we're going to try our best. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Sailkite and Diggs and let them kind of give you guys a quick spiel on what they're looking forward to or their favorite part of kind of the news this week while I switch us over.
Go for it, Sail.
All right, sure thing. So, without hands down, clearly the most outstandingly crazy, actually unprecedented thing to have happened in the past 2 weeks is, of course, a journalist has gone inside the hallowed halls of Ep11 Studios to see all about what's going on with Revival, and of course we had the great fortune of that man being, Felix. So, I could just talk about that for 2 hours, but of course, we have other things we can visit first, and so we're gonna be pushing that back for the second hour, so that we can actually keep you guys here for longer than 1 hour. But yeah, that for sure. But there's some other topics on the forums that have been really active and interesting, so hopefully we'll get a chance to discuss those things as well.
The thing I always love is the forums, and with Revival forums, we've got plenty of info coming in through the blogs. I'm always amazed by how much of an info dump we get via the ritual casting of six questions that forces the devs to answer, and we just get a ton of information. So there's all kinds of juicy bits to talk about always, especially after 2 weeks.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we've had one time before where we missed a week, and it was like there was no way we weren't going to be able to do a 2-hour show with how much stuff there was. And I feel like the same this past week. We took a week off for Mother's Day, and I had that tour coming up, so I was kind of crunching a lot of stuff in last week as well with family time since I was going to be out of town for a couple days. So, but yeah, a lot of great stuff today. I think first of all, we can kind of kick things off. We've got the developer blogs, of course, and back 2 weeks ago we have developer blog 26, which was talking about whaling and Moby Dick and all the stuff that involves. So first off, I thought that it was interesting just in how big of a thing whaling is. I actually wasn't expecting it to be like such a huge part of the game, but as I'm learning, relearning, and with this game, every time you hear about some new system, all these systems are being built in such a way that, they're compact in what they are, they're independent, but at the same time, they're being built so that they can interact with lots of other different systems in the game. So it shouldn't have been surprising, but it was surprising to me to see whaling get talked about and then see so many other inroads for other systems to kind of play into that, and how that specific small thing can impact the economy, can impact combat, can impact naval, can impact political even. There's just so many different things that it was being touching and connecting with that I wasn't expecting, and I should have. I'm going to learn for the future to just start expecting this stuff, but I don't think I can. It just doesn't register in my head. What about you guys? What were your initial thoughts for whaling, and what did you like about it? What did you think stood out to you the most?
Well, I'm anti-whaling, so the first thing I thought about was, what can we do to help the whales, and the dolphins, and the porpoises, which I hope we have in there. And the blog started off by talking about cetacean intelligence, so that has me wanting to communicate with the cetaceans. Dolphins especially, I guess. We don't necessarily normally think about communicating with whales, but can we see them on other planes? Or are they trying to communicate with the elder gods? What's going on there? And what else can we do besides kill them? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, definitely something. You wonder how much PETA's gonna try and infiltrate. Oh, they're trying to kill animals.
Can I start PETA? That's what I want to know. What can I do?
Diggs is gonna start the in-game PETA in Revival, so he will.
It's what my 14th character.
It's why I'm glad that my character may dabble in a little bit of character assassination. Maybe I'll have to be against Diggs here. Kill the whales. We need the blubber. We need the cosmetics for the brothels. All that stuff.
Oh man, now I feel kind of bad. My first thought was about war whales. I mean, they sound like they're not just going to be standard. I mean, I imagine be standard fairly docile whales, but there might be more aggressive and potentially even agenda clad whales. Need I digress?
They said they would be angry whales, so they didn't say docile. They said angry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, even
Predator,
whether
predator
they're war whales against us. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, it's gonna be. Well, it's different. It's right.
We don't eat whale eat you.
Oh man, wouldn't that be fun? Having getting strained through a baleen, I don't even know, a sieve. Just getting sliced to bits and your soul being shriven by a whale song or something crazy like that.
It's really nuts how huge the whale, going to hunt a whale is going to be, because already, in real life, hunting a whale is pretty incredible task on its own. But then you tie in the Lovecraftian themes of these being these massive creatures maybe having some advanced intelligence or being under the control of some elder god or foreign deity or something, and that makes it all the worse, because all of a sudden you're looking at an intelligent creature that's already hard to catch being intentionally aggressive and dangerous, and all the more hard to catch. So it's pretty exciting. It's automatically the ocean scene and them talking about boats seemed pretty exciting for me, but just having something like this out there, and it's I'm sure not going to be the only thing involving the ocean and boats, so already it seems like there's another dimension to the world, kind of the way for everybody that was following Landmark and EverQuest Next, kind of the way this underworld third dimension that they had to the game, it seems like the ocean is adding another dimension that's as impactful as something like that. So very intriguing, especially too if we get underwater places eventually, Lost City or something. Who knows what? It could be pretty crazy.
Well, just mentioning the tie-in to the what else is in the ocean and elder gods and all that just reminded me of, I don't know why I didn't put it together before, but might be with the help of Cthulhu staring me in the face. But giant squid, giant octopuses, what? Those are other things we might have to deal with, and they're pretty intelligent too, actually.
Yeah, I get some krakens going on, I'm sure, or equitable, fantastic and terrifyingly well-designed creatures. Yeah, well, so there's two things there, right? Which is, of course, I imagine somehow. I mean, I wouldn't know the specifics, of course, but the Trinity of the Sea there, Hadra, Dagon, and Cthulhu are going to be, somewhat, I imagine, various shades of displeased by the hunting of whales, and therefore Biggs might silently be winning some approval there by attempting to thwart such a thing. But of course, there was some mention of how the specific mini game would take place, right? And by the sound of it, that seems to, lend itself quite well to not ambush, but exploitation by people looking to raid, whaling ships, because the mini game is basically, a fairly demanding by the sound of it, at least as far as attention and game, camera perspective goes, so that most of the crew of a ship would be involved with actually processing a whale at one time, or maybe not processing it on the boat, but it leaves you vulnerable, right? So you might want to hire a mercenary, for instance, to protect you or scout the seas around you and give you advance warning of someone who might be coming to wreck you.
Yeah, I'm pretty jazzed up about the depth that's being added. Just in touching on one thing in Wales, how much it seems is being added, and it really kind of shines light onto how complex this game is really going to be when you have something that's so standalone that you can already see affecting a lot of things. You start imagining all the other systems that they're talking about. These smaller systems, the weather, the temperature, the different, all these different core systems, and it really just starts creating all kinds of complexity and makes the game more unpredictable, I want to say, just in that you're not going to know what, like in a typical MMO today, MMORPG, when you go to a certain place in the world, what's going to be there, It's, even if it's somewhere that you're going for the first time, you've probably looked at a guide, you probably have some idea by just the world map that's half the time already revealed to you, what's going to be there, and the general mobs, you encounter the first couple, and what the rest of the area is going to be. And I feel like Revival will have so many, working parts that it's not going to be that way. Even, going to the same place later, it's going to be different just by, all these, even if you don't count like actual mobs changing or NPCs affecting the world, just counting in all these other systems and how they're affecting things, you're not going to be able to really go somewhere with a certain agenda and expect that to be bulletproof. So that to me is a huge, just a huge indicator of something unique about this game that's, has the potential to take it to, this next gen level.
Yeah, how does that tie into animal lore? How does it, as a skill, will we be able to interact with them differently? Will that help us understand their migratory patterns? And I also wonder how that could tie into having a ghost ship, being a ghost pirate and a ghost ship, and having whales on my side, war whales, war dolphins. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, I'm somebody who's definitely excited about the ocean aspect and having it like, I've got, a little tenement, and I haven't really invested in a bigger house because I'm really just waiting to see what happens with boats, and I'm going to be in that scene somewhere, whether it's, I don't feel I'll be in the merchant side, but I definitely want to be in the combat side of it. So I'm not even looking at a houseboat, but a combat vessel, maybe one with a cabin, so that I can just, participate in anything the ocean has to offer, because you're going to need a combat vessel for anything, for helping the merchants, for all-around general warfare, for whaling. I'm excited to see the news we get on boats in the future. I'm assuming it'll be the somewhat near future. The devs can probably chime in chat and let us know kind of more of a time frame. I know they talked a little bit a couple months ago about trying to get that to come out along with housing, which is, progressing further, especially from what I saw there. They're getting a lot closer on things, so it's going to be pretty exciting to see that stuff rolling out. So I am really excited, and I don't know about the whole ghost boat aspect of stuff, but it will be interesting to see how death and dying affects what's going on at sea. You're not, if you have a boat out there and you die, in some naval combat, like how do you get back to your boat? How do you like? It's kind of an interesting complication to things. I'm kind of wondering how that's all going to work out.
Yeah, so I hadn't thought about this at all until you just brought that up. But like, so I mean, we understand that as a general formula, when you die, you, depending on your spirit skill level and stuff, or I guess it's an attribute, not a skill, but your spirit attribute and a number of other factors that you linger around as a ghost, right? So on land, this makes perfect sense. You're on land, like you just walk around and use the same geometry and everything, right? But give or take what shenanigans Amba and Snipe might want to throw in there. But on the sea, like it could go very different, right? Like, I mean, on the one hand, you could say, yeah, you just stay on the boat, well, not instance, but you stay on the boat, where you died, right? But then, what if there's a possibility, right, that if you die at sea, be it on, either in the water or on a boat, that you could, essentially not free cam, but, free cam and who knows how ghosts move, right? But, actually start using that as like a diving mechanic indirectly to, figure out what's down there, maybe. I don't know. And yeah, what if someone like throws your body off the boat, right? Like, so you just get killed for trying to mutiny on your ship or something, right? Because everyone's getting scurvy, and so you tried to mutiny. The captain's just like, no, smacks you down. You get completely destroyed, and they don't even, I don't know, they find some horrific way to kill you and make an example of you, and then they chuck your body off the boat, right? And so now you're sinking to the bottom of the sea because you're filled with lead shot everywhere, and how does that interface with your death mechanics and how far your spirit tethered to your body or something, or retrieving your corpse and stuff like that, right? I mean, you could become a relic at the bottom of the sea depending on what kind of stuff went down with you.
I'm almost certain that anytime I die in Revival, there will be no possibility of corpse retrieval, because I will be in so much of a mess that there's no going back there, unarmed and re-kitted completely with a lot of new work put into it.
So we'll have a walk the plank minigame. That's what you're asking for?
That sounds awesome. I will be instituting that regularly on my ship. So if you ride on, prepare just to have one just for party times. Like, there may be no reason to have it other than to just play around with the system.
I was looking again at the end of the blog, and it says that whale blood, some say, could be used to summon portals, and that even the songs might be magical, so there could be some interesting ways to use these creatures to help with rituals. That could be fascinating.
Yeah,
Dead and alive.
I really, that part really jumped out to me, in the end of being, for people that, because magic is going to be pretty rare in this, but for the people that are like, I'm going to be the best mage, the most powerful, I don't care how mad I get or how crazy it gets, like, I'm going to be the most powerful, like, they're going to need to participate at some level in whaling. They're going to need to either buy from people, depending on how far they want to advance this, it may be in their best interest to actually, help fund excursions to make sure there's a steady, incurring of whale blood and, who knows what else. It's just interesting how whaling alone, like I said before, just this tiny, it's just this compact thing on its own, is going to affect so many core systems. And if you imagine, like, your own particular play style, what you want to be in Revival, what you want to do, whaling probably affects you in some way, even if you want nothing to do with it, even if you're not going to create PETA in Revival, or you're not going to try and kill the person who's creating PETA in Revival. Whaling will probably affect you somehow, whether you're, a blade for hire, have a ship. It's going to be interesting to see just how much influence each system has on the whole wider game at large. So that's something that just, I'll probably say that like at least 3 more times this episode. I apologize, because it just kind of blows my mind, which I think is important. There was that post on the forums about standing points. That was, a lot of great questions if, when you're coming from traditional MMOs about, different things that are being done with the standing point system. But really it all boiled down to, like, you got to throw so many assumptions out the window, because the game is just so different. Like everything you're trying to achieve in the game is just, is there a top, can you be the best in Revival at I don't even know, like, it doesn't make sense to me now that I've gotten more into the game and understood kind of what it's going to be about. I see how when Snipe Hunter responded to, what was it, Apocalypse, I believe was the poster, how he was able to, kind of provide pretty logical answers to how, those things aren't as big of concerns for what they're trying to do, because, he clarified a few things and also went into detail about just the way this thing is being built is just so different that your normal experience is going to be so off the charts that you can't really look at it and just assume a bunch of things. It's almost going to be like, the people who, I don't know how many people, did you guys played EverQuest or Ultima Online? I'm sure there are a lot of people, that have played that are in chat, but when you first got into that game, you couldn't really think about another game and apply it when you were coming in. It was a whole new experience, and you just logged in and you explore, and you're just like, well, what is this game about? And you tried to play. I don't ever remember coming into EverQuest for my first time or anything and being like, okay, I know what I need to do here. It was just brain reset, even though I'd played tons of video games before. And I feel like Revival has that kind of potential, and it kind of showed with that Standing Points post, which if you didn't get to check out, you should definitely check it out, because it really gives some great insight into Standing Points and also into monetization and really into how the game is going to be a lot different. Just like Verde Monzana just said, it's a meow, not an MMORPG, so that's a term I have to keep reminding. I work in MMORPG realm, so I have to keep reminding myself to use that term, because MMORPG is so ambiguous. It's pointless to use these days, which you guys have heard me rant plenty. So, but with that being said, I did want to go. Let's move on to the developer blog 27. I believe is a good place. I think that one kind of ties directly in. We talked about you're going whaling and you're going to need to hire some handy blades, and there are mercenaries is a viable role and path to take in Revival. So what did you guys think about that blog? Diggs, you want to kick it off and tell us what you thought about the blog?
It's just cool to go again into a level of detail. I think what I liked about this one specifically was taking the stance of a character that's not going to have a house and might choose to camp. That's just a whole nother facet of how different people can play differently. I don't know.
Yeah, there's so much info being put out on this game. I actually was not even aware of this camping thing. So I'm like, after this stream gets done, I'm going to have to dive in, because I saw it, but I was too busy prepping for the episode to actually dive into what the camping thing was that everybody was talking about. So I'm going to have to look into that immediately after this, because that kind of fits with my drifter character style as well. So that was pretty intriguing to hear, and that I believe that was even mentioned in the Standing Point article too, of camping, about the housing concerns. So that was it's obviously been talked about big somewhere. I don't know where it happened. Hopefully not in the IRC, because I don't get enough time to actually sit in there and listen to the genius and wonder that drops in there. What about you? Go ahead.
I was going to say though, real quick, by the way, talking about camping, we need a word for I've been calling them vagabonds, but we need a word that's not gypsy for some culture that's, uses caravan wagons to roam around. And
Nomads? I've always heard nomads is pretty nomadic.
Nomads are
lifestyle.
A little different. I mean, we're still thinking about the what's the Romani culture. So specifically that idea with tarot cards and all of that stuff, and maybe a little on the outlaw side. But we just don't want to, I don't think we can use the word gypsy. So whatever culture that is, if the devs know what that is, we could use a name for that at some point.
Yeah, and I think it'd be cool if we could get some, like a whole bunch of in-world names, right? So if there's a particular in-world culture that's, obviously related to this lifestyle and mindset, then, getting their sort of self-claimed name thing would be cool. But then also what, other people call them, be it pejorative or just neutral, right? I mean, you can call someone a drifter, a nomad, a gypsy, a vagabond, wayward. I mean, there's we have tons of words in English. Cersei says itinerant. I mean, there's plenty of words with lots of fun contexts. I would never oppose a lore drop in chat though right now. So by all means, if you wanna satiate that,
yeah,
cool.
I think too, because of the concept of the way they're doing cultures in this game and locations and language in a sense between, having different names for the deities between different places you're in, it wouldn't be, out of the question to have these types of individuals called gypsies by one culture, but called vagabonds by another, depending on the context of that particular culture, having a different name. And I'm not sure how their name changing tagging. I'm not sure how that works quite yet. But we do know the tags, different names for the deities may have different implications for the tags for unlocking specific content.
It's just because gypsy is what we would normally use, but it's highly offensive at this point, so we probably shouldn't be tossing that particular word around.
Yes, definitely good to stay on the good sides of your potential player base if you can. So if there are any people out there that fit under that potentially derogatory term, then you probably want to use it if you think they're going to be playing your game. So
yeah, I mean, so as far as the blog goes, though, I like not just the camping thing, the fact. Or go ahead, Dix. Okay, so I like the camping thing, insofar as it helps allay sort of certain fears about how someone without a house would play it, in various ways, but also just like the fact that there's sort of an element of not boredom, but like a login, like and what am I gonna do kind of thing. I mean, obviously, in this particular instance, the player would already sort of know what they could do, right? Because they know sort of what the standard ins and outs of, like, oh yeah, all the whaling boats go early and I missed that shift. So I'm not going to be able to jump in and do that. But, it also provides an inroads on someone who just logs in and, doesn't necessarily know too much about the game because they just heard it from their friend Joey. And they're like, all right, well, what do I do? And so, they could be the archery guy who's like, man, I don't really know what to do, but I found this cool bow or, bow from wherever. And so then a slightly more knowledgeable player is like, hey, you want to make some buck? We're going to go out towards, Fall Creek and take a caravan up the mountain and I'll teach you some things. And I like that mindset because, there's much more potential for interesting, not conglomerations, but like interesting, interaction. I don't want to use the term interaction because it's a really, really droll word, but like, there's interesting interactions and things that players can do with each other and with the world that go beyond any sort of sense of a regular, system from any other game, be it a quest system or a, reputation system or anything like that. It's like, you do a thing and you predict, other things that people can do that are also completely off books or on the books if they become not, if it's something that people do enough, right? But I mean, it's just a much more, the topography is totally different. I mean, it's not like a regular game. It's not linear. It's just whole order's different in terms of the way it all maps out.
yeah, I definitely think that exactly what you're saying stands out to me as well. Your typical MMORPG or online social game, you have quests normally. Sometimes that's not always what they do, but regardless, whatever content the game is directing you towards is definite. Like you pick up a particular quest, for example, and it's got a definite goal there. It's got, do this, kill X this, go take this to this. You have this definite thing to do. It's defined. It's plain. You may have something scripted pop out that just happens to throw things off. But generally, once you've picked up a certain quest, you know what is going to happen. With the different examples that have been provided in Revival just so far, I mean, just in the episode today, we've talked about whaling. Now we're talking about mercenary highwaymen or something on the road, escorting a caravan. You sign up for this, and it's very indefinite. You know that you're going to be getting on a ship and going out to hunt a whale. You know that you're going to be escorting a caravan, but you have no idea what's going to be required of you necessarily. I mean, maybe if you've gained experience doing that, you'll have some idea of what to expect on any given one. But even then, who knows if somebody's risen up a shrine nearby, and there's all this this chaos going on. The road's impassable. Like, it's just so different. And it lends back into that concept I was talking about earlier of this game that's very unpredictable. You're really just experiencing the game rather than playing the game. I don't know if that makes sense to most people, but I feel like you get into a game today and you can play the game and you're gaming the game. You understand how it works mechanically, and you're doing what's optimal. There's people take their different paths, but they're playing the game. And in Revival, I feel like yes, you're playing the game, but you're not going to be gaming it. You're going to be experiencing a world, which was a big response thrown back to me when I was visiting this last week at Ilphonic. It was emphasized a lot by the different developers. All the way down to the artist too. I mean, even when I was talking with Cliff Figment in the chat, if he's here, he even said, like his favorite thing about doing all this is that they're actually building a world. It's not, to him, he doesn't even, it's not the joy about creating the game. It's about creating art and creating structures in a living, evolving world, and it's more than just a game. So I think that's a really important aspect, to touch on and like stay cognizant of as we break down mechanics of this game. Even though it is a game, it's a bit more than that. So it's really, really interesting. What about you, Diggs? What do you think of this? Are you gonna be a highwayman in one of your 19 alt characters?
I don't have a highwayman in my list, but one of them might be some form of traveler. I have several who will probably stay in Crown's Rock, but I have some who will be traveling around too. The thing that Sailkite jogged my memory of was the job board, and I don't know why the job board felt so much cooler in the blog. It's not like other games have not had them. It did remind me that it was one of the things that I really liked about my favorite single-player MMO, KOA Reckoning. There was a job board there, and you could go and get your different quests from the job board instead of from individual NPCs. And one of the things that the job board has me thinking about in Revival is, what if you're going not just for a mercenary? So what if I want to do needlepoint? There is the Argent Needle is one of the places that's a shop of some kind in Crown's Rock. So I'm assuming there might be some kind of sewing or needlepoint skill. What if I go to the job board because I want to find someone who needs my needlepoint skills? Or if I'm a cook, what if somebody wants me to cater or needs a caterer for a party, and I can go and find that? So, I don't remember going to anything like that really for professions in other games. I just wonder how robust that could be and how cool that could be to go to a job board and have interests and tasks to do for things that we consider more mundane besides just combat. But what was the other thing? Job board. Oh, and one of the coolest parts of the blog was the bartender who's like, take care of this guy, but don't kill him. That's one of the things that I loved about 3rd edition D&D was I would usually try and avoid combat any way I could. So I would buff up my all of my diplomacy and bluff and any diplomatic skill that I could that would help me get around combat. That's what I would focus on. So if we can have other ways to deal with malcontents, that would be cool.
Yeah, I kind of enjoyed my experience with job boards in Firefall that used some procedural generation of content, and the job board worked as a good way of being that center hub for you to find this procedural content that was just randomly getting created around the world at different intervals. But I think the real win for Revival is the fact that there's going to be so many player needs that are going to be capable to be filled by other players that it makes complete sense that a job board would have the ability for players to post things for each other, as well as NPCs, to be just throwing stuff up on there as well. So having a good mix and kind of sticking with the thing that they've talked about a lot, where you've got NPCs and players doing the same things, and they're so intermixed that you shouldn't feel like what you're doing for players should be drastically different from what you're doing for NPCs. That way, players feel immersed in the world, and that way, the world actually feels alive and contributing towards, everything the players are doing. So I think that's huge. And specifically what you were talking about towards the end of that there. Oh geez, I just totally, my train of thought just left. But
because we have too much to talk about.
Yes, there's literally
really
so
do.
much. There's so much stuff. But yeah, I was running on a train of thought and it off the rails. The tracks ended.
Well,
Sorry.
here I'll
Go ahead, Sal.
because I've got 3 or 4 really cool
Good.
things that are going on right now, and then hopefully some of the alternate dimensions where we don't forget what we're talking about will shed their light on us. But so Firefall. It's really interesting. So I was actually quite early on involved with following Firefall and sort of thinking about what it was ultimately going to become, and unfortunately it didn't become that. But Firefall was really cool in terms of being an example of well-meaning dynamic content, right? So one of the big and kind of most interesting, it got repetitive, but most interesting core systems for Firefall was something called thumping. Thumping was essentially what your resource gathering mechanic in the game was. And so you would go in the world, you had what was called a scan hammer rate, which was basically this metric, thing that you would smash into the ground and measure the densities and concentrations of different qualities of materials in the ground. And so they had gases and organics and metals and stuff, and these were involved in the class system. But you would swing your scan hammer, be like, hey, this is a great spot or this is a bad spot, for either what I'm looking for or just generally, something cool, right? Because resources had a whole varying range of quality within the particular resource, and then also concentration, right? So people would spend time searching for, and it would change daily or hourly or something. I forget the exact time frame, but you would go searching for materials that you wanted either to sell or to use in your crafting, and you would then throw down basically a not tower defense, but a point defense mini game where you had to defend the thumper thing for however many waves or a certain amount of time until it finished, and then you could get the resources to go. And this was really cool because every day you would be defending different locations, and different locations would have different enemy spawns basically, and so it would always be an interesting different sort of combat scenario in which you were trying to gather resources. And then it also had the fact that you would roam around doing the mission content and stuff as well. And so it's like that, but affecting so many more things at once that then also mesh with each other, right? So it's so for instance, with the job board thing, instead of just being like, oh, hey, does anyone want to come thump with me in this place, right? You can be like, I'm looking for people in the future for the next week that are going to go thump, methane or whatever. And so if you can thump some good methane, I will pay you for it, and here's my price ahead of time, right? And it's cool because the reward structure on the way players do quests and do content for each other is completely it's not point A to point B. You can be at either end of the service, you can be at the seller or the buyer, and you can post something on the job board. And I don't know the specifics of how this would go, but I'm assuming you basically just write out a note and stick it on there, or an image or something, depending on how in depth it goes. But you can be on either side of that, or even a middleman, and you can post basically about things that other people can do for you. And so if you want to sell your needle point, you can go ahead and preemptively, instead of looking for people, saying, I want to buy some needlepoint, you can go ahead and say, here's Dig's 18th character embroidery shop, right, or service, and feel free to swing by and ask about it, right? We'll do custom work for you. But it's also, I think, potentially it can be even better than that because it's a free-form medium. Assuming that it's not just like a, post like a one-word, like assuming it's not an overly simplified system, and I don't think it would be. I'm gonna guess it's heavily involved with like all the pagecraft stuff. You would be able to, be as cryptic or specific as you want, right? I mean, if you wanted to be maybe a little shadier, you could put something down on the corner, like a small torn corner of a page in the corner of the board, right? Just this little like riddle scrawled on it, yeah. And someone would be like, "Huh, I wonder what the hell that means," right? And it could be a gag, right? It could have no meaning whatsoever, and it could be a wild goose chase. And you could do this with, not just a riddle, but anything, right? Someone like, "I want to buy whale oil," and it's just a complete sham. And so someone wastes like an hour, getting some whale oil. But and someone could say like, "Huh, I wonder what that means," and they could go figure it out and find when whatever it was that they were supposed to find, and then oh man, revival geocaching, anyone?
Oh, geez.
Gosh.
Yeah, that would be... There's just so many possibilities. It just opens so many doors. The other thing I really wanted to hit on while we were kind of talking about this mercenary role, day in the life of a mercenary blog, is the role of combat in Revival. With it being, we saw it. There's a role for combat in whaling. There's a role for combat, in other things. Because it really, one thing that I think was try to be clarified a lot through the different blogs I saw this past week, where people were talking about there's much more to this game than combat, but still combat has its role, as this day in the life of mercenary blog gives a ton of examples. They don't go in detail onto each one, but they kind of, I think, Onwood did a good job showing you how there's multiple avenues if you want to be a combatant, what you can do, just from the wrestling people out of the bars in the wee hours of the morning and clearing them out before closing, or before your new guests come in that want to have a drink and don't want to have some drunk like sloshing into their table, knocking things over, who knows what. From that all the way to you participating in caravans and whaling and stuff. There's a place for combat in everything, and I think this is something that we can touch on a little bit. What you guys are looking forward to most, or maybe some areas of combat that you've thought about that haven't been talked about too much, or that you would like to see. Because I believe the next developer blog next week will be diving a lot into combat and arena fighting and gambling and all that stuff. So what do you guys think about where combat stands and how it's being used in Revival so far?
Go ahead, Biggs. I've got nothing off the top of my head on this, so feel free to start.
I don't really have anything either. I'm kind of holding back until we get some more details about how it actually works. There's going to be different stances, and I don't really understand how the concept works. I just know we'll have different stances and different abilities available as we're in those stances. And like I said, I tend to try to avoid combat where I can in even regular D&D, original D&D. I like to be the stealth guy and mapping out the room. I'm kind of an explorer first. It's not the combat that draws me, and I used to rant all the time about how awful it is in D&D that you had to kill in order to progress.
I see where you're not wanting to kill whales comes in here. Then you're a closet pacifist. No,
I'm a total hippie pacifist, and make love, not war. I'll be in the brothels, not out in the streets fighting people. But I would expect that I would be more towards the magic end in Revival, just based on what we know so far. But it depends on what you could do. I just don't know what's going to be available. Somebody asked in the forums if the drunken martial art might be a style, and that could be something that I'd love to try. But And there's also, you can hire bodyguards. So I'm also thinking I might let the muscle take take care of that for me. But there's all kinds of interesting stuff, like the shield wall and what that would be like participating in the shield wall. What role would I like to play if I were going to participate in that kind of combat? So
I'm glad.
I think for me,
go ahead.
The whole scope is so different. I can't really get a grasp on what it's going to be like.
I'm glad you brought up the group combat type stuff, because I can't remember where. I mean, there's been so much revival this week for me between writing and visiting and all of the stuff. Somewhere I heard something. I hope I didn't just dream about it, but about the ability for there to be people that rise up as like combat leaders, and they can command formations. That might have been in one of the video interviews. Maybe was it?
I think that was Snipe Hunter.
Snipe, yeah. Which I haven't got to rewatch yet, so I'm still just kind of brainstorming. But for you guys that watched it and kind of will have some idea of what I'm talking about, being able to go into a larger combat type environment, like maybe you get to the point where your city or your guild is so powerful, you're going to employ all your guards and actually wage some sort of a campaign or some strategic push to maybe capture some nearby thing. And having actual other players participate, in your subordinates as, or, soldiers in a formation, or, depending on how they fight, and having group techniques, that is really intriguing to me, because I've always been a fan of, I don't know if you guys have played like the Total War series, Rome, Shogun Total War, all those, where you're commanding regiments of troops and there's some strategy. I think it's really interesting, the implications that a larger scale combat can bring to things, and I don't know, how the engine handles all the bigger stuff, but even just having some small version of that, like maybe a 30 on 30 or something, and just having a few different formations, a few lines, some basic, I guess, medieval combat way back in the day. You'd have some, lord of a certain area fighting another. I'm sure they probably didn't have more than, 50 guys, to their name at some point, or knights. So you'd have this small scale, but larger simulation of, organized combat, which is really interesting to me. So I'm really curious to hear more about that. I know the blog didn't specifically say that was going to be talked about next week or anything, but with Snipe having mentioned it to me in that video interview, and now it kind of makes me wonder what's the agenda, because that ties into that whole political realm, of the people who have the power up are going to probably have that realm of influence to serve in the role of being a combat leader, or a commander of some form. So that's really interesting to me.
I was going to say something, but I'm going to wait until the next hour when we can delve back into that and talk about some specifics there.
Yeah, Sale, you look like did you have some things you wanted to throw in on this topic of combat?
I mean, I was just reflecting on sort of some of the shield wall stuff. Not just shield wall, but larger, large scale tactics, and even small scale strategic play. And I would hope, of course, that it has at sort of that level, that it would have to evolve, unfold over time, right? Like if you're doing a very pointed, or not pointed, if you're fighting in a split pass or something like that, right? So there's basically two separate walls of two walls fighting each other. That you would need messengers basically running back and forth, or on horseback or whatever, trying to speed communication as best as one could, short of magical means, and who knows what that might be, right? But I mean, there would be an opportunity for someone to get to play that role, and be able to just do nothing but relay messages and still support combat without having to engage in combat if they're worried about their skill not adding up. But then also I sort of realized in hearing you talk about it that I really want I didn't see the movie, so don't use the movie as your reference here, but like Les Miserables, the Revolution chapters, right, where there's all the fighting in the streets and stuff, and there's sort of these improvised stands, and this sort of complicated, hot, really noisy, dinish, melee thing going on, where it's just, there's who knows what anyone else is doing except you and the guy in front of you, right? And I really want to see stuff like that happen eventually. Just like absolute chaos and people just trying to stay alive in somewhat unknown situations whereby everything that was is just completely not for an hour.
I feel like that is going to exist, but just based on what we've heard about politics and realm of influence for guilds, or different things as they start to gain a lot of vying power in a city, as far as voting wise and putting people in power, and eventually instituting their own leader or their own form of government, changing the form of government. I see that that could be a potential possibility for any given city, that maybe one guild just continually starts to gain power until it gets to the point where they're like, okay, time to throw a coup and make this our town, and then we can set our prices and set our and just start doing things like that, and you have some amount of the population might revolt, or who knows how close the war could be. I guess it depends on how careful the guild is in masking their power until they're confident they have enough to really overthrow everything. So, and that too adds in that whole layer of intrigue too. So I think the role combat will play with politics is probably the most interesting one. Maybe it doesn't seem like that at first, but I think as we get into the game, actually, once these things start getting meshed together and you see the value of power, of having a place of influence in the world, combat will naturally serve as one heavy player in power, vying for power, and because ruling an actual region has so many implications for trade and other things. It's definitely the primary power grab you can probably make. I would say, like, what was that blog we were talking about before on the standing points? If there is any probably top in Revival, it would probably be a member of a guild that controls a portion of the city, or a entire city. So I would say that's probably, if there can be a top, that's definitely one way to have a top, but just because of how many systems it would affect. But then again, who knows if you won't get wiped out by Cthulhu stomping you down. So,
it's all subjective in any case. I mean, there could be leaders of the government, there could be leaders of specific types of guilds, and I'm thinking of specific merchant guilds. So if we're talking about needlepoint or cloth or whatever, there's going to be leaders of that. All kinds of stuff could happen there. The one thing I did want to mention, I guess, I mean, you kind of jumped into your video stuff prematurely, but the other cool thing that Snipe mentioned about combat was keeping up the morale of your troops. You could be at a shield wall and things go badly enough that they decide to break, or maybe they don't like you as much as you thought they liked you. There's all kinds of stuff that could be happening there that we'll have to think about in ways that we don't typically think about in combat. They also had a really great, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, they had a really great link to a clip from Vikings of a shield wall combat, and that was totally cool, where you could see the different positions, and some people are standing back and shooting their arrows, some people are using their pole arms and long spears to shove holes through their own shield wall to jab at the people on the other side. I think the other people on the other side didn't have much of a shield wall, so they actually were broken and ran away. But the people who were wielding the shield wall had a lot of different strategies, and I think we didn't see it in that clip, but it was mentioned somewhere on the blog, maybe of this mercenary one, of chopping at the feet of people underneath the shield wall. There's all kinds of different strategies to go around. So those could be really fascinating roles to have in combat that we typically don't see.
Yeah, and one little quick thing. I know we're about to intermit here, but in keeping with the morale thing, just to sort of set the stage for whatever we choose to talk about right off the start, at the top of the hour. If morale starts to falter, right, and I wouldn't know the system, but someone jumps in and essentially takes on a heroic posture and reinvigorates the entire platoon or squad or whatever, right, and basically gets everyone back in it, and causes a victory in a particular battle, right? Then in keeping with sort of like the reward structure thing, because I had originally wanted to say this and then I forgot about it, was that they could be then commended beyond any way that a regular MMO structure would permit, right? I mean, sure, you maybe get more honor, right, in a battleground if you do really well and get a bunch of kills and such. But if instead, you actually take an active role in, shaping the battle, the outcome of the battle, right, then the humans, the players, or the NPC, as the systems go, if things are really that impressive, can reward you for actually doing something like that. I mean, the storytellers could be like, man, this guy just, whipped, got the ball rolling back, in their favor. Let's kind of, boost this guy up. And
when the bard
merchant
starts
can pay
singing
you for it.
Metallica, the bard will start singing Metallica and rally the troops back.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, exactly, and legends will be passed down of his valor. Absolutely, man, absolutely. An ecology.
Oh, awesome, guys. All right, so on that note, we are going to roll into a quick intermission so we can cut this nicely for YouTube porting, and also give you guys a quick little break so that you don't have to get up in the last section of the show. So we'll be right back in a couple minutes, maybe 3-5 minutes or so. So yeah, take it easy, guys, and we will be back in a minute.